I remember talking to a lot of my clients about confidence because we get caught up on about, we need to be confident and how confident you're in situations. And I think, well, do you really need to be that confident about certain situations? And do you know what I mean? I've sort of started to flip it a little bit to what I call it courage. I go for more courage, which is
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello, Julian. Pleasure to have you back on the show here at Share.care podcast, where our belief is that global peace starts at home. Feeling safe, valued, and heard gives you a foundation to confidently step out and make the world a happier and safer place for everyone, because it's in our own interest to help others. How have you been, sir?
good to see you, Damien. Always a pleasure to come on here and have a chat with you and ponder life as we do, and go away with some new thinking and new perspectives. It's great. Thank you. I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah, we certainly do. We've the innovations that we've come through, and I do listen back to our podcasts. They're quite just take thinking to a new level. And today you mentioned talking about confidence, which I'm quite happy to talk about as well, because I deal with that all the time, and certainly have had my own journey through developing confidence, and now through my consulting have a program called Fearless, which we address confidence. I'm really excited to talk about this and get your take on confidence as well. Where do you, I mean, where do you think confidence comes from?
It's an interesting concept, isn't it? And I've sort of wrestled with the whole thing of confidence because it feels like something, it comes and goes,
Mm,
and at times we don't always have a lot of control about it. We get into certain situations and perhaps we've been there before, we've experienced it before, so we feel confident because we know it.
mm,
But then sometimes we might be doing the same sort of process, something, but the context might be different, and that sort of throws us a little bit, doesn't it? And I remember talking to a lot of my clients about confidence because we get caught up on about, we need to be confident and how confident you're in situations. And I think, well, do you really need to be that confident about certain situations? And do you know what I mean? I've sort of started to flip it a little bit to what I call it courage. I go for more courage, which is a
mm,
slightly different sort of connotation of what confidence is, and almost not puts you in control, but allows the sense of when you step out into something, you don't entirely know what's going to happen. That takes courage. Take the example: if you're gonna abseil off a mountain, as people do. I've done it many years ago. I'm probably more reluctant to do it now, as my scared of heights has just increased massively, with my ears going all funny. You might be really confident about the rope that you're holding onto.
mm,
It's really solid. It's not gonna snap and break. You're confident that it's pegged into an anchor and that's not going to sort of pull away. You're confident that the instructor who's told you things and all the sort of gubbins you got on you as well. But confidence won't get you over that edge.
mm,
It's more about courage. It's the courage that's the first step, because particularly if you've not done it before. For
mm,
me, this relates to a lot of places when we don't do things before. It's courage that will take that step, because you're going into the slight unknown, I think sometimes that's for me a better reframe of when you get into situations and you get those feelings of, I'm not very confident. Well, that's okay. That's fine. Just take a step, take a sort of courage step. You don't know what might happen, and I think that allows you to sort of push the boundaries a little bit more. Because I think sometimes being confident in something, and I understand why people want that, but you get so sort of set in a comfort zone, don't you, as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I love that. And ironically, because we're talking in the pre-show about, because I, for the listeners, I missed messed up the time, so I logged in half an hour earlier, and then I'm waiting. Then I realized that I'd actually got the time wrong. And in my spare time while I was waiting for this, I was doing a bit of research. But it's ironic that we if I understood we were talking about confidence, but when I was doing the research, I was just looking at my notes now. I was actually looking up courage. And it's
Mm,
funny that you just mentioned that, because we must have been thinking similar sort of things. Because I know with the program that I have, Fearless, when we talk about confidence, I think I break it into three components. I break it into experience, and
mm,
this is a Michael Jordan, or whoever your favorite sports star is, that they've done it so many times that they've got the natural, well, maybe it's not natural, but they've got the ability to do it well more often than not. And that's an experience thing. And anyone that repeats something, pays attention, gets the feedback, and does that exercise is going to have that experience where more often than not, they're going to perform better than someone that doesn't have that experience. So I put that
mm,
into that category. The next one I have is what I call self-confidence. And that's not about whether you know you're going to succeed. So it's different from experience. If you've got experience, you're pretty certain that if you give it a go, you're going to do well. I
mm,
put self-confidence in the category of similar to, we were all babies once. When we we're trying to learn to walk, we got up, we fell down, we got up, we fell down, we just kept getting up. And I put self-confidence into that category of, we're just going to keep getting up. And then I'd take it, so that's what I call confidence. It's not knowing that you're going to succeed. That's experience, because you've got the
mm,
experience to know you're going to succeed. Confidence is, I'm going to give it a go regardless, which falls into that category of courage, I think, where you're talking about.
mm,
But the other step that I feel that's needed with that to make the confidence work is self-esteem. And this is that you like yourself regardless of how you're performing, that you think
mm,
you're okay as a person. It's your self-worth isn't linked to your performance. Your self-worth is linked to you existing, and because you exist, you're worthwhile. And if you
mm,
have that mindset, then it's similar to a baby. A baby hasn't learned those negative reframes of I can't do it or whatever. They just keep trying because they've got that self-esteem. That's
mm.
how I like to break that down. And then I have my little pop culture references as well. And one of my favorite, and I cut these little clips out of movies, and have made this a number of different clips together. But one of my favorites is from the Cars 3 movie, where Lightning McQueen and Cruz Ramirez, I think it is, the yellow car, they're having an argument, and then she's about to storm off, and she turns back around and she says, how did you know? How did you know you could succeed? I'm paraphrasing slightly, but his words to that effect.
Mm,
And he thinks about it for a minute and he goes, I don't know, I just never thought I couldn't. And for me, I took that away as something that when I look back at my history of when I've done things, and some of the things I did probably pretty extraordinary as a kid. I raced radio controlled cars, as was the norm. It was very popular back when I was young. And we raced at an off-road track. And there was a lot of people that had on-road cars as well, which they obviously couldn't race on-road, and they were just driving them on the street. And I thought it'd be really cool to have a place to race those cars. And there was an old netball courts in the town where I was that no one was using. And I can't remember who told me, but someone told me that the fire brigade actually owned that land and they used it to practice. And for whatever reason, I found out who the fire chief was. I went to his house, knocked on the door and said, hey, I'm from the local radio control car track. You've got these netball courts. Can we use them to make a car track for on-road radio controlled cars? And then he hooked up through that, introduced to the committee of the radio controlled car club. And we got that. And I look at that from that Lightning McQueen mentality, was I just never thought I couldn't do it. I just went, I'm going to go.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it was that
Do you
baby.
think that comes out? Was that how old were you then?
I was probably somewhere around the 8 to 10-ish, I think.
Was that a
I
sense
rode
of
there on my BMX bike. So
okay, a sense of almost not naiveness, but just the
I would say naiveness, that naive that I
yeah.
could fail. It was,
But in some ways that's really healthy, isn't it? Sometimes have
yeah.
that sense of that why not? Why would not that why would somebody say no to that? And actually obviously it all happened. It all happened, didn't it? It all
Yeah,
took
yeah,
place
they
and
built the
yeah.
track, and I mean, they didn't take my design for the track, but they somebody else's design. And then we had car races there. It was really cool.
It's almost like it's this self-belief, isn't it? So there's a whole it's more is it the belief, isn't it, that something will happen based on you. You know, you took a step to knock on that fire chief's door and you had a belief, didn't you? A belief that it would happen. And I think that is probably linked to confidence as well. Because the reason why people don't do stuff
Mm,
and don't step out, which is I suppose courage, is they don't believe it's going to happen, or they don't believe somebody will follow them or do what they ask, or you know, whatever it may be. And I think is that a belief, isn't it? A self-belief in ourselves, which might
yeah.
be linked to self-worth as well.
Yeah, well, and if I'm analyzing it, I think it was more, again, linked to that, Lightning McQueen quote where it was the negative, that it wasn't that I thought I could, it's just I didn't think I couldn't.
Mm,
So there was nothing in there going, well, nothing preventing me knocking on the door, nothing preventing me asking. I didn't know. I wasn't really thinking, and I'm just trusting my gut feel at the moment because I don't remember the exact thoughts. But if
mm,
I'm trusting that gut feel, if it was more about, oh, they're going to do this, or I can't do this, it's leaning more towards that I didn't think I couldn't do it. I just went, yeah, okay, I'm going to ask the question. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be, but I was going to ask
no,
anyway.
which
Which
I
is,
think is really quite nice to have that not knowing that, because to me, courage
mm,
is is stepping into that arena, knocking on
mm,
the door of the fire chief,
mm,
not knowing if this is going to be successful
yeah,
or not successful. And that to me is courage. It's there's an unknown to it, an unknown quantity. And I think we we don't do a lot sometimes in our lives where we don't sort of excel because we're not willing to put ourselves in that place. Now, you probably didn't feel very uncomfortable because you just thought, well, why not? Just and it's probably
and
linked to
I'd
something
agree with your word.
very
I know ignorance is probably a strong word, but I would agree that that was probably my thinking as well. It was ignorant of maybe I could get a no. It was just like, I'm going to ask anyway.
it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's probably linked to something very passionate that you were passionate about at the time,
Mm,
which is sort of linked to sort of purpose at that moment.
yeah.
When something's sort of linked to something we're passionate about,
Mm,
we just go on and do it. And it's interesting because I've just recently launched. I'm launching a mastermind program, a resilient growth mastermind program, and it is interesting because I went to I got a launch event and I started to put stuff on social media and email
mm,
people, all that sort of stuff. And I had that initial, and you do have it. It goes and it crosses my, what if nobody comes? Do you know what I mean? And I think it's quite healthy to have that little
mm,
sort of keep your feet on the ground type of thing, not in an arrogant way. And I remember saying to my daughter because she's coming over from Canada and she's going to be actually there on the evening.
mm,
I said, well, I felt a little bit like vulnerable with it. I sort of put it out there,
yeah.
and it's a local thing. I'm thinking, all right, what if only 5 people turn up? Do you know what I mean? They will look around, they look stupid, and it's that moment. But I could have, oh no, nobody wants to do this. And actually, no, I thought, no, I'm going to go for this. And it felt slightly vulnerable, felt fairly not so sure. And I've got over 30 people signed up, which is brilliant at this stage. I've still got less than sort of 3 weeks
Mm,
to go. So I'm really pleased with that. But yes, there's that little moment of transition when you put yourself out there, and because I've not done this before, this is a new
mm,
thing for me. So
yeah.
it's I've got no experience of doing this in a sense of the actual. I've got experience of what I'll be doing, but
Mhm,
the actual event itself, it's very new. It's very new in my sort of my group of network as well, and
mm.
so I feel I'm sort of pushing a boundary, and so I feel slightly out there, not that wildly radical, but it feels slightly radical for me.
What was it that
Um,
gave you the impetus to keep going, to go, well, when you had that thought process? Because I've had similar. I did put some training programs in an area where it wasn't going to be receptive, if it was people that weren't really going to do that. And I ended up doing a presentation to my friends and family and a couple of other people they brought along, but it really wasn't many. But I was expecting that because I know that that area where they just weren't, it wasn't something that they would be interested in. So it wasn't really the right market to be doing that.
Mm,
So what was it from yours? So because I understand that feeling, but I was expecting that people weren't going to turn up, and it was going to take, it was going to be a slow burn to get some traction.
mm.
But you weren't expecting that. You're expecting, you ideally you would have like, oh, you've got 30 people signed up, but that part before you had people signed up, what was it that pushed you to keep trying to actually keep moving forward?
It's linked to what I do. It's my purpose really about
Mm,
what the program's all about. Unlocking human potential,
mm,
helping companies build strategies, and creating resilient sort of cultures and mindset. And it's linked to that, and that's why I do it, and that's why I initiated it, and I had to sort of talk to myself a little bit and say, why am I doing this? It's linked to my why. It's linked to who I am, what I do, what I love doing, and the fact that I'll be able to help business owners, business leaders, and even when I've been talking to people the last few weeks about it, I'm sort of quite sort of passionate about it, and I can sense myself. I have to almost hold myself back a little bit because I feel I'm a bit like OTT with people with it and sort of what it'll be, and then I have that moment thinking, am I setting something so high as an expectation? Suddenly, people are going to turn up and go, "Oh, is that all it is?" But no, but then that's challenged me as well because that's made me think. Okay,
mm,
I want people to go away feeling energized, feeling inspired, learning something. So it's not just me doing a pitch for
mm,
a program. It's there's an element of that in a roundabout way, but I'm going to do some interactive sessions as with a group of 30 odd people.
mm,
We're going to do another session that will be interactive as well. And so there's lots of stuff, and they'll go away with some new learning, I hope, and new ways of
mm,
thinking as well. So even if they don't sign up, they'll have an experience that's positive, inspiring, but also learning. But it's what's kept me going this is my purpose. This is what I do. It's what I'm good at. It's what I love doing. It's what gets me out of bed. What motivates me. Seeing somebody, helping somebody, you know, open their eyes to things really excites me. And I think that's what's yeah. But each stage is interesting because you sort of I did a teaser campaign, and that was a little bit like, oh, and then I did like a little teaser of the campaign, and a few of my local sort of people know, oh, this are you teasing us here, all this sort of stuff. And then I did 1st of September, put it out there,
yeah.
and then you sort of take a deep breath and think, okay, and then it's just got, and I started talking about it, and then also I got the event coming up, and then so, but it's putting myself slightly out of my comfort zone as well, which is I'm doing something. It's interesting about the confidence. I'm doing something which I'm experienced in, but I've never done live coaching in front of an audience before, which is what I'm doing, facilitation, which
Uh,
feels really scary as well. I'm excited about it. It's interesting. I'm turning my
But how is
sort of,
that feeling? You say it's a little bit, you haven't done this before, and that's part of what I want to understand from a confidence perspective, because as we evolved, as people evolved, it was safer for us to be part of a group. Now and that's where we get that comfort zone. But now you're stepping out of that and putting yourself, you said you haven't spoken in that sort of format before. You're putting it out there for the first time and hoping people do turn up. Prior to them signing up, you didn't have anyone, so there was no reference point that they were going to turn up. How did you? What is it about that stepping out of the comfort zone that enabled you to go, "Hey, I'm going to put myself out there," especially when from a primal perspective, there's that fear that you could get eaten by lions.
yes, I'm very aware of those saber-toothed tigers that are prowling around. Um, but it's interesting because I'm doing things in isolation. I've done all those things that I'm doing. I've spoken at events, I've done coaching, I've done facility, I'm doing all the things. But what I'm doing, I guess So I've got experience individually in certain contexts. I'm just bringing the context slightly differently,
Mm,
and I'm bringing it together and making it. And what I am reframing, instead of thinking, oh, I'm doing live coaching, live facilitation,
mm,
that's really scary, isn't it? Uh, I'm now saying to myself, it's the same feeling. I'm really excited about this, because the reason why I'm excited, because I know the impact it's going to have. And I was just telling my wife last night about one of the sort of exercises I'm going to do at the start. So that sounds brilliant. That sounds really good, doesn't it? I said, yeah, it
mm.
does, doesn't it? And I'm really excited. I mean, I'm literally, bizarrely, instead of thinking saber-tooth tiger, I'm thinking I'm really excited to share this, because I think this will really bring some value to people. They'll see some benefits from it. And so I'm taking those emotions that are exactly the same, whether you're excited or nervous. They're
Mm.
basically the same emotion. I'm just sort of reframing and labeling it. I'm excited, and the reason I'm excited, because of the impact I know it'll have. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm even talking to some of my sort of network and saying I'm thinking of doing more events. Like, I haven't even done this event yet. I'm already thinking doing some collaborations events, and I'm almost saying to, "Are you up for doing stuff like this?" Oh yeah, we'd love to do some. And I said I could do some like one-to-one coaching and show a bit, and you could do this. And
Mm.
so I'm sort of trying to build this bit of groundswell of other people coming on this journey of doing something slightly out there,
Mm.
not wildly out there, but in the context of where I am at, it is out there.
Mm.
And so, yeah, so I'm sort of almost doing that self-talk to other people, and almost putting accountability by sort of putting it out there a little bit more, sort of saying, this is what I'm thinking of doing, and then just sort of slightly testing it and see what people, that sounds really good, doesn't it? And I'm thinking,
Okay.
yeah, it does. So I'm almost slightly putting an accountability, because I'm putting myself out there by talking about something, but also almost testing the reaction of what people might think about that as well.
That's what I was hearing you were saying then, was that you put it out there and you've got some feedback about, "Oh, yeah, I'd like to do that," as well with you. You were talking about, the next ones and
Mhm.
things like that. Has that helped boost your confidence in the ability to move forward, or give you, that, I'm gonna say Dutch courage, but it strengthen that courage to keep moving forward, getting that feedback as well? And obviously, you've got the feedback from your wife who said, "Oh, that sounds like a great way to start." Those kind of things, have they helped?
They have actually, yeah, yeah, no, and I think it's, I think the lesson for me is to share more with people, in that
Mhm.
sense of what you might be doing, not as a,
Mm.
I'm thinking, not getting people's validation. It's not about that, but sometimes
Mm.
sharing ideas, because also you get the feedback loop, isn't it? As you share something, you hear it for yourself, what you've just shared. And I've done that before. I shared something and actually thought, no, actually, I'm going to redo that because it doesn't sound right as I've explained this to you. And so I think I'm finding that's really helpful as well. And just getting that, yeah, that feedback and that interaction of thinking, oh, that sounds really good. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, because I was understanding what your self-talk was, and whether, has it always been, was it consistent going, "Okay, I'm gonna do this," and you had that same confidence, or there was some dips, and then, say, your wife come along and said, "Oh, that would be a great idea," and what was going on inside? Was it a straight line, or has it, there's ups and downs and
No, I think when the idea came about a few months ago, I was very
mm,
excited. I thought this is a brilliant idea.
mm,
I thought, not revolutionary, what people do, but for me, it was really, really good idea. And I thought, and it's something different. And I always believe not just doing different for the sake of doing different. I think it's good to sort of push yourself. And I believe about being outside my comfort zone. I think it's really healthy.
mm,
And a worst case scenario, I always think I'll learn something along the way of this. That's what'll happen. So,
mm,
and I've done things before that have not worked, but I've learned from them. I've looked back and reflected. So it's not that, oh, I think this will really work. It's just actually, I think it aligns to my purpose. It aligns what I'm doing. It makes sense. And I'll give it a go. I don't know the full outcome, whether people will join or all that. I'm not, but I know along the way I'll learn loads. I've already been learning loads. And so at the start, I was really, yeah, this is great. It's when I was about to send a note out that said, this is what it is about, and you
mm,
can sign up. Which that point, my confidence just
Crossing the
slightly
lines.
went a little bit like, because it was stepping over the edge of an
Yeah.
abseil. I was like, I'm not so sure about this. I'm confident in who I am. If I get people in the room, I'm all that, but I've never done this before. I'm not so sure about this. And
Mm.
that was the courage step. That was the step of take a deep breath. Let's just go for it. I'll go step over the edge. And that was that moment. And then since then, as I've spoke to people, people have fed back to me and said, "Oh, this really good. This event looks really good, and I'm looking forward to this." Da, da, da. And I'm thinking, "All right, okay." Then I get concerned of have I sort of put this as a massive event up here, and they're
Mm.
going to be like, sold a puppy, so to speak. But no, and I think my confidence has, or my what feedback I'm getting is grown since I put it out there. As you go over the edge of an abseiling, once you do the first 2 steps,
Mm.
you think, "Oh, I can do this. This is good. I feel okay." And then you carry on all the way down to the bottom, and at the bottom, you think, "Yes, I'm glad I did that." And I think that's why the analogy of the abseil for me really works well.
And was it that self-talk? Do you have to remind yourself about that? Having gone through my own journeys, when I look at that, another example was being an adult with, as I mentioned, radio-controlled cars. As an adult with some money behind me, I bought a massive building, of 1,800 square meter building, and built a radio-controlled car track inside it to have fun with.
So
Um,
you bought one instead of knocking on somebody's door and asking you could borrow
Yeah,
their
so,
thoughts. Yeah,
so later in life, bought a factory, gutted it, built a radio controlled car track inside, and then had car race
fantastic.
meetings there. But the thing was with that as well, took it a step further where decided for whatever reason, I don't know if Le Mans was on or something like that, but decided to hold a 24-hour radio controlled car race. That's This has not been done it's been done a couple of times in the Northern Hemisphere, but never in the Southern Hemisphere. So we had the first 24-hour car, but then, I mean, convincing people that this is a good idea. You're going to be awake for 24 hours racing toy cars. But it turned, we even got press in UK RC magazines, which was really cool. Um,
Wow.
and but it was that whole process of going, it was a good idea, but then when that implementation come, there was a whole bunch of hurdles that got in the way. And so I'm just wondering from your experience, and it sounds like as you did that program, it progressively built, and you really haven't had any major setbacks yet. Is that I'm trying to link that as to how we deal with that from a confidence perspective, because a lot of times we put in the category of New Year's resolutions. A lot of people make New Year's resolutions and don't even attempt them. Um,
Mm,
and some people might do things. Sales is a great example where people that are in sales, a lot of people will call once and never call back again. They won't make that. They've got a knockback and they won't continue. Where does
mm,
that fit within the confidence perspective? And I'm linking that. I think I might have told you about well, I'm not sure if he's a friend, but the guy I was in the army with, that was
mm,
dating all these really beautiful women. And one day we asked him how he was doing that. And he said to me, "Well, what you don't see is I ask a lot of them. Most of them say no. You just see the ones that say yes." Um,
mm,
and I'm just wondering where that resilience comes into the confidence picture from what you've experienced to when you've had
mm.
times where you get a setback and you go, "Oh, I'm going to try again. I'm going to try again."
Yeah, and I think that it is. It's an element of you talked about how when you're learning to walk, you fall down and you get back up again.
Mm,
And it's not just about just this. Well, there's a number of things, isn't there? There's the getting back up again, which for me is linked to I've done this before, or sorry, I've fallen down, something's got in the way, setback, whatever it is. But I know this is the right thing to do. This path I'm on, this direction I'm going in, generally, and it's linked to my purpose. And I think that's to me really important. The thing for me about the resilience piece is when you do get the setback, and I have done similar attempts at what I'm doing now before,
mhm,
that's not been very successful. Um, but what I've done, and this is what I did a few months ago, I went through those and say, why did that not go as well as I anticipated? What was wrong with it? And I reflected and learnt about it. I learned about, the target market, learned about how I went about launching it, how I marketed it, how I engaged, everything. And I sort of went through the whole process. And
Mm.
I thought, okay, I need to do this differently. I need to focus on this type of people. I need to make it more local. I need to make it in person. I need to do some form of a launch event that demonstrates. So I took all those learnings, and I think that to me is so this, as much as at the moment I'm seeing success of 30 odd people signing up. They're not there yet, but a few won't turn up. As you know, most people will turn up. These sort of
Yes.
things. Um, there's still a journey to go to get to that place where I get 6 to 10 people who come on the program, and I really help them. That's where we're going with this. So there's still a place to go, but I've it. Before this, I've tried similar things, but
Mm.
just not been successful. So I've just taken the learning, and I think that's where the resilience piece comes in. Is when you do get a setback, instead of just getting back up and just having a go again, which is obviously important, just take a moment to reflect on, do you need to do things differently? Because if you keep doing the same thing, you'll end up with the same result. And so you need to perhaps reposition things, redo things. And I think that's, to me, is the important thing in resilience, is that learning loop. And I think often is forgotten. It's not just about grit and determination.
Mm.
Um, and then that the self-talk comes back to, does this align to my purpose? Because if it doesn't, then hey, why are you doing it anyway? You're doing something that's not really, because you're perhaps doing it because it might make some money or something. And that's
Mm.
not a reason to do anything, to be honest. It really isn't. And so, make sure it's aligned to your purpose. Use your purpose as a way to inspire you and to keep you going. And that helps you. And that's what I've been doing at different points when I felt a little bit like, eek, I feel a bit uncomfortable with this. No, this is the right thing to do. This is what I'm about. This is how I help people. This is how I serve people. And this is what I'm doing.
Is it a mindset when you talk about those ones before where, you gave it a go and it didn't quite work out the way you wanted, but yet you're still giving it a go again? Is it a mindset of looking at it from that perspective of you're recognizing that other people have done this, and it's more about that learning that there's something you need to learn from that to actually make it work, as opposed to you can't do it?
Yeah, I think, initially, if I look back, it's so easy to sort of look back and think, I've had a couple of attempts at this and it's not worked. Oh, it's not for me then, isn't it? Um, and give up.
Mm.
And I think, and that's where it's so easy to slip into that. And I've realized, actually, no, I know people I've spoken to who've been very successful. They've told me they've had multiple failures or things that have gone quite well along the line. And
Mm.
I've, even in my previous life of the corporate world, we've tried things and they've not worked.
Mm.
And so it's completely normal. And I think I think it's because, unfortunately, social media doesn't always show that, because it's like,
No, it doesn't.
if people say, I did this and boom, I've got a £1 million business, and you're thinking,
Mm.
okay. But actually, people sharing their journey of reality, that they actually did
Mm.
make some mistakes, things didn't work out, they failed, or whatever it is, they learned along the way. And I think that's the important thing. So I've normalized that things don't
Mm.
always work out as you plan. And I'm still on that learning journey. And I'm sure even on the evening I take, there'll be some learnings for me on that evening, thinking, okay, next time I might do things slightly differently.
Mm.
That's okay, that's fine. So I suppose I've set my mindset that says it's okay to fail, but it's make sure I learn moving forward, and making sure what I'm doing. And in each of those instances, they've all been aligned to my purpose.
Mhm.
It's just the executional piece is not being probably the best way of doing it for me.
With that process as well, because as you were talking, I was reflecting on some of my own experiences in that similar sort of thing, and I looked at it, and the reason I did it was I looked at around at what was available, and I thought, I'm doing stuff way better than this, much better. the quality of what I've got on offer is better. And that was, whether it is or not, that's subjective, but in my mind, it was better. Yet it didn't work. And when I reflected on it, I went, well, the content's better. What is the component that's different? And then it was then recognizing that there's a whole bunch of other things. Just because you have a better mousetrap doesn't mean people will beat a path to you, or if they don't know anything about it, you haven't reached people, they don't trust you, all that kind of thing comes into play.
Mm,
And so they were factors that I put into which I felt helped my confidence, in the sense of that ability to get up and do it again. Was there are other elements that I needed to be aware of that were outside of what I needed to succeed, I hadn't learned that skill
mm.
to succeed yet. Is that something that resonates with you? And if so, expand on that.
Yeah, no, no, totally. And I think what I've noticed, the reason that I've got what I've got so far and people signed up is I know a lot of those people,
Mm,
and it's relational. There's a trust. They've seen me over the last few years at various events. I've spoke at events, and
mm,
so and I talk about what I do and stuff like that. And so I think I've realised actually that's probably what I'm using as my equity, really, in terms of they call it the sort of the halo effect, isn't it, where you can say anything, but they think you're brilliant at what you do. They like you do this, you great, we heard you speak on resilience, it was really good, really inspiring, blah blah blah. So whatever you do, Julian, will be great anyway. And that's called the halo effect, where
yeah,
some people literally just do that. And I know I've been in situations where people know me, and I don't know, I could say anything and they would think, oh, brilliant, that's amazing.
yeah.
And then not complete lie, but because they just
No, I
take
get that
all your
effect
previous
too.
and so, and I think I think that's has been one of the key things I've realized in the last few months is I probably didn't realize that until I stepped out there, if you know what I mean. I sort of knew, but I wasn't so
Mm,
sure. And then I think that's what I found as being the sort of probably the key factor that's probably driven this so far, I think, in that sense.
Do you think that helped with that confidence, having, because that gives you a foundation? That's what I put into that category of experience, because you've got those relationships already, and a number of those people, because of that halo effect, will just be supportive. Do do you think that helps with that confidence?
Totally, and I think when we're doing something new and expanding ourselves, I think we need to build from a base like that. I think we
Mm,
can't do everything completely, without a framework that's tethered to some, whether it's an experience
mm,
or people, what people think of you. I think it really helps the energy, and when you interact with people, and say I've had conversations this week with people. I said, "Oh, I'm really looking forward to what you're doing. Da, 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 sounds really good. Can you tell what you're going to be doing?" Or and it just builds you of who you
mm.
are. So I think it's important to ensure that I suppose it is we build upon what we've already got, isn't it?
Mm. Because that's where I put that category with the fire chief and that first car track when I was a kid. I really do put that probably in that ignorance category, because I probably didn't have the experience to know how to do that. As you were saying, the relationships, I didn't have any of that. It was just blindly giving it a go. And I'll give another example of that where it was pure ignorance. I was with a group of people, artists, actors, those, and we're at a party. And I was a little bit, I think I was probably about 18 at the time, and a little bit ignorant in areas as well. I think I was, and someone was playing the guitar, and I went up and asked the person, how to play the guitar, honestly thinking that I could just pick it up and play it really quickly, and it was just a very simple set of instructions. And that's
Mhm.
where I kind of put that in that ignorance category. In some areas it can be really helpful, but like you're saying, to have that experience is going to help build that confidence.
Mm,
And is it, and for me, it never was something that I took as a negative. I went and bought a guitar later and started to play, and then learnt that process. Not that I ever learnt to play it properly. Um, that it took a little bit more than just, oh, you're just strumming away,
Mm,
and it's easy to pick up. Although, as James May put on Top Gear, if you learn a few chords that you string the right way, you can string it slightly differently, and you can play a whole bunch of songs with just a couple of chords.
mm.
Um, but is that one of those things? Do we need to be mindful of that step of building on that confidence so we don't completely shatter it, or can you just be completely, ignorant like me and just do it and it doesn't really affect you?
I think sometimes some ignorance can be really helpful. I think, it's like, say, for example, that I'm trying to think of an example now. I think I was speaking to somebody a few years ago when I was younger, and I didn't realize that they were actually, I think it was on the phone. They were like a CEO of a massive business. I didn't realize who they were really.
Mm,
Um, but I thought I just thought it was somebody else. And I just remember talking to them quite sort of normally and it
mm,
was a really good conversation. But sometimes if I'd known who it was and what their level of, who, not that people are better than anybody, but, somebody who's a
yeah, I
FTSE
mean,
100
there's that
business.
awe factor, correct?
Yeah, that can sometimes make you change how you think because you've then
Mm,
suddenly you position yourself below them and
mm,
put them up here, and I don't think that then helps. So actually, the naivety sometimes can be really helpful, where you don't really know who they are, position. You just having a conversation, and then you find out they're a billionaire or something like that, and you think, I didn't know that. I had no idea. We just had a just conversation, and actually, that's almost getting that place where you treat everybody on the same level as a
mm,
human being. And I think that's where we perhaps need to get to, I think, more with people, just to actually treat everybody as a human being and look to see how you can help them and serve them. And then from that, whether they are, the King of England or, a
mm.
president or CEO of a big company, it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, they're still human. They still have the same challenges that you have as an individual. And I think that's perhaps what we need to sort of do more leveling of, because I think it's sometimes that gets in our way because then suddenly we go, oh, I've got to speak to the king, and there's sometimes there's an element of we need to be a bit,
Mm,
prepared for those situations. I think it's healthy to do that. But if I had a conversation with the King of England today, I was thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to say? Do you know what I mean? It'd be slightly, but they wouldn't want that. They would want just a normal conversation, or
yeah.
whatever that might be. And I think it's try to, so flip that around a little bit, really. I suppose,
Well, because
yeah.
I wonder that I'm linking what you're saying there to that self-esteem component that I'm talking
Mm,
about at the start, that you're worthwhile regardless of how you behave. Just because you
mm,
exist, you're worthwhile. And an example of that, with what you're talking about, what you're mentioning about, and you're talking to the person that was really wealthy. When I was young, I was in the army in Perth, and there's a wealthy businessman named by the name of Ralph Sarich. He invented an orbital combustion engine and made a lot of money, and then invested in property and made even more money. Um, and I thought he'd be a good person to ask for advice. And I found out where he lived, and I didn't stalk him or anything like that. But I wrote him a letter. So I wrote him a letter asking some questions. And because I knew where he lived, I put it in his envelope, but I also put a stamped self-addressed envelope in there as well. And he actually wrote back, which was,
oh,
yeah, it was for me, and I'm just wondering whether that fell into that category of ignorance, or just that, willingness to ask and think, well, I'm worthwhile. This person's worthwhile asking, and I've had that many times where I've met people that were very, very, very wealthy. And somehow we've had a conversation. I've got their details. They've given me their details.
mm,
And then I've contacted all their secretary's details. It's usually the secretary, but I've got their details. And then I'd say, look, can I buy your coffee? I've got a couple of questions I wouldn't mind asking. And I'd book. And sometimes it was 6 months in advance that I'd have to book. but then we'd go and I'd meet them and we'd have a coffee and I'd ask them some questions and they'd make time. And
Mm.
I can't remember once where I actually paid. They ended up paying or for lunch or whatever it was. And so as you were talking about that, it's again that confidence, and I'm wondering what it is that stops us just from asking. Is it the fear of a no, or fear of failure, or because even if you don't
Well,
ask, it's a
yeah.
no anyway. So,
Well, exactly, yeah, and I think the self-worth piece is interesting because I think there's a huge piece that why we perhaps don't want to do that because we don't want to bother somebody. They're very important. They're
mm,
busy, and we almost put those limiting sort of beliefs or narratives before we even get there. And I think that often is the case, and it might be true in some ways, but you don't know at all because you just don't know.
yeah,
And so I think it's important just to, I talk a lot with my clients is looking for evidence for something that you've come up in your head. I always say to them, they might come up with, oh, they said this, they think this, think that. And I go, oh, how do you know? And you see them realize, I don't really know, do I? No, you don't, do you? You're making things up again. And I think it's,
you're telling stories.
and we all do it. We all do. We all make these little narratives. And those
Mm,
narratives, as we know, are powerful because then
mm,
they either liberate us to do great things or they hold
mm,
us back. And I think it's that self-worth piece, isn't it? Where actually realizing it's trying to ground people of who they are and who you are. As you said, that we're human beings. I have some value. I can help this person in some way, I'm sure,
mm,
and I can serve them in some way. And I think it's realizing that and believing that, and believing your own narrative of that. I've asked many people to come on my podcast that I just ask. I just think if they say no, they say no. If they don't, well, they generally don't reply. They say no. That's a no. If they don't reply, that's a no. But more often than not, people say yes.
mm.
And some people say to me, "How do you get all these guests on your podcast?" So, well, look at me. Why wouldn't they want to be in my podcast? So you don't know who I am. But no, I say, well, I just ask. What do you mean just ask? I just ask them, and well, and some say yes, some don't reply. And I've had Olympians, Paralympians, world record holders,
Mm,
business leaders of FTSE 100 businesses, sort of important people or significant people in that sense. But they're just people, and I have great conversations. And it's funny, I don't bat an eyelid with who I had on. Oh, you spoke to so and so, and they're just a human being. And I just think, well, my purpose is to have a great conversation, get some real insights that will help my audience. That's that, and it goes back to that drive of my purpose, of why I
mm,
do it and want to do it. And I say I talk to all sorts of people, and I get into all sorts of scenarios with people where and I think back, how did I get into conversation with that person? How did that happen? How did I suddenly end up with talking to that sort of powerful person in a sense in an organization? And I think and it's not a naivety. I don't. It's not. I do go with the sense of I know I've got some real value because I've got
mm,
something that could help them as well. And so I think I feel like there's an equalness in that sense. I don't feel a sense of yes, I'm you know slightly thinking I'm amazed at some of the people I have on because of what they've done and who they are clearly because I want to and I'm fascinated by that. But I go with that curiosity and that's what I go with and I'm really interested. And I get people come back to me and say, some people who've been on podcasts before. So your questions are brilliant. I really enjoyed this podcast and really give some really nice feedback. And you're thinking, okay. And that's nice to get. That bolsters your confidence clearly because people say, genuine things unasked about, and that's helpful as well. So I think it goes back to that. Try to level yourself with that person, not thinking that they're better than you or this or the narratives of they haven't got time. Well, find out. As you
mm.
say, you write a letter, make it easy for them, and if they write back, great. If they don't, they don't. So what? Move on. No big deal. There's other people, and sometimes it's finding those people who you want to connect with, who will be your tribe, who will be your advocates, who will be your mentors, whatever it is.
Mm,
We can't be. and it goes back to that whole people pleasing, isn't it? Where we're thinking we should be friends with everybody and get on with everybody. We don't. I do chemistry sessions with my clients, and most cases it works out. But I know when I meet sort of what I say potential clients in the context of networking, and I think actually if they ask me, I don't think it would work. The chemistry's just not there, which is okay. That's fine. That's okay. Actually, you'd be better with somebody else. I think
Mm.
sometimes it's to recognise that we can't always be the right person for everybody else. You know what I mean? That's in terms of that interaction, and that's why some people will say, "No, I don't want to work with you," or "Don't respond," or "You're just not." Do you know what I mean? That's fine. That's okay.
Mm. How does your unconscious or subconscious, whichever you choose to use, come into play from your experience? And I know, from my experience, I'm pretty confident talking to people. I might not get my words right all the time, but generally I'm pretty confident and I can articulate what I want to say reasonably well. But I've found, because I have to deal with, in some of the clients that I've dealt with a number of legal cases, and I've been in the witness box, and cross-examined. And I've found in that experience, as much as I know that I'm a good speaker, I clearly know what I'm talking about, yet I've found myself, I've noticed a couple of times that my leg is shaking as I'm talking that, and that process was, and I'm telling myself, calm, and then I've gone back again thinking, okay, just relax, calm, and I'm there waiting, everything's calm, everything's fine. And then when it becomes that time to stand up and actually speak, it seems to go away again. And I've noticed, and I've paid attention to a lot of other people talking in that space, and I've only seen one person actually do it very, very calmly. Is that, and I'm putting that in unconscious space, because you're being impacted by the environment. Obviously, court is a very intimidating
Mm,
place.
yeah.
Um, but where does that play into your ability to focus and have that confidence to give it a go?
Yeah. I mean, I've never been in a court context, fortunately. Hope not to be in either way, either side, as it were.
You've got to take it
Um,
into, a barrister was telling me when I was, first, I think for the second time I was being prepared for cross. They said that the best you can hope for is a 50% result, but it's not likely to be that. So it's like, it's
that's not helpful,
really,
is it?
yeah, they, no matter what you say, they twist it and change it around, and it's worse than what you see on TV. It's really bad.
Yeah, no, I think that's yeah, that's the hard bit with that. I mean, to that scenario is, and what's happening there is a stress response in essence, isn't it? You're in a saber-toothed tiger scenario
Well,
massively.
and the put it in a context as well. And I've seen it, and I haven't been on the other side of it, but I've seen other people have that, on the other side for me, which was fantastic that it happened. But normally you get to raise your point, the other person gets to respond, and then you get to, if you've raised it, you get to respond to that. But the person didn't raise certain points. They went to raise it the second time, and the judge said, "No, you didn't raise it the first time. You can't bring anything new now." And so it is that environment. If you don't do something right the first time, you don't get a
Mm,
second go.
crumbs. And I suppose for me that say that stress response is kicking in, where your fight or flight, your
Yeah.
amygdala's going on. And when you're in that position scenario in your brain's in fight or flights, and adrenaline's running and everything else, um, it's not very good at clear thinking and logical
Mm.
thinking, and therefore it it just wants to say things, do things, basically get you out of the situation. That's all it is, and you end up saying
Mm.
the wrong things. You get Freudian slips, all sorts of things happen, and so if I was going into a court situation, for me personally, my preparation would be, well, I know my ice baths is part of my building my threshold
Yeah.
of stress response, because
Mm.
it's putting myself in an uncomfortable position. It kicks in the stress response, and I control it, and then my body starts getting used to that, and therefore my
Mm.
threshold for stress goes up, as it were.
Yeah.
I would do, like deep breathing. There's a technique where you do a deep breath in through your nose, hold it,
Mm.
and out long through your mouth 2 or 3 times, and it activates the vagus nerve and takes it.
Mm.
So if you're feeling a bit stressed or a bit like I'm like, oh,
Yes.
you do that, it literally within seconds will activate your vagus nerve and then switch you from your sympathetic system to your parasympathetic, which is more your more relaxed response.
Mm.
And then that stress response sort of goes, and then you then get into your prefrontal cortex, your logical thinking. And so that's what's in that scenario. And I think sometimes when we are in a situation when we're feeling a little bit like, I'm just about to abseil and go over the edge, and I feel psychologically stressed here, but also physiologically something going on in my body, and everything's happening, and I don't feel I want to go to the toilet. All sorts of things start going.
Mm.
That is when we need to start control ourselves, and that's about doing breathing. Also, thinking about and I'm always building those personal habits beforehand of whether it's mindfulness,
Mm.
cold water therapy, all those sort of various things. But yes, certainly breathing in that moment will really help you to stop you
Mm.
and switch and almost switch the switch internally.
Mm. Because the reason I'm raising that, I mean, for obviously for me, that becomes a very extreme experience, and that what is going through there, especially to you, you prepare, and I prepare like you would believe. There's so many notes and things like that, and then they ask you something obscure that you hadn't even, you know, you could go. And like you're saying, it becomes that. But the reason I was raising that is because a lot of people have that same experience just to, stepping out, of it, moving something forward. It might be, speaking in public, for example, or
Mm.
at an event, and they start to feel those same things, and how to deal with that. But what you're talking about there, if I'm hearing correctly, is to really build up that resilience beforehand, and recognize that it's a process of these different steps that you can actually build that resilience, taking the time, if you've got the time to do that, um, to take that breath and step back, get the prefrontal cortex part of your brain
Mm.
engaged, so you're actually thinking as opposed to operating from that primitive part of your brain. Am I hearing that?
Yeah, it is because you can't control it. Well, you can, as in when it happens, it happens, and I think it's okay. It happens. It's who we are. It's how
Mm.
we're designed to protect ourselves, to survive. It's a survival mechanism. But when you're presenting to people, your mouth getting dry, you want to go to the toilet, you want to run out of the room, you can't speak, you can't think clearly, you're all muddled, is not really helpful. That's not survive. So that's not really a help. So you have to do things to change your physiology, basically in psychology and
Mm.
internally what's going on. I think, and so as you say, whether you're in the front of the court or you're presenting or doing something just new,
Mm.
it will happen. But the practice is what I do helps build the threshold, so it takes more and more. I was in a situation recently. I was consulting with a business, and there was some quite a challenge, and I felt fairly, wasn't really, and I pushed back, because I've got an inbuiltness of, I don't get rattled so easy because my threshold's gone up. It takes a
Mm.
bit more for me to sort of trigger.
Yeah.
But when I do trigger, then I would think about, if I was like going to go and present, I was getting all nervous or anxious. I think, okay, I'll do some breathing just beforehand, just to sort of
Mm.
switch me back into that parasympathetic system. And so, yeah, so I think it's okay. It happens. We all have it, and it's completely normal and natural. It's not helpful, and we need to switch it, and we can do that, and then we can control it in that sense.
That threshold, yeah, we do get that. I had that experience today, trying to sort out a technical issue, with a website which has been repeating over and over again, and they still can't get it fixed. And I'm having the conversation on the phone, and I'm having to explain something that I've explained again and again several times.
Mm.
And I'm The threshold, it just wasn't even worth getting upset about. Normally I'd get, well, not normally, but some time ago I'd get frustrated with that
Mm,
response. Like, oh, can you just, but now it's okay. Yes, okay. Here's the password. Here's the access, and working the way through that.
mm.
Where does control fit within this ability to have that confidence? Because there's research that shows that people who, if they have control move, their ability to make decisions, their own decisions, and direct where they're going. Um, and I'm going to add that the perception of control as well, the perception you have control over an outcome or your ability to act. Because again, I'm looking at it from that, using that court example. What makes part of that really intimidating is from the get-go, you don't have any control. You go in when the judge calls you. So you're kind
Mm,
of sitting around waiting until you're called. And then when you're called, you're still waiting inside until they actually call you up. And then you might have some things that you want to say. And I've done that where I've prepared, speeches, and a lot of it,
mm,
they'll ask me something different. So I've got to answer what they're thinking. So that removes a whole element of control.
mm,
And you're not in a position where you can say, hey, no, let's do it this way. The judge is the judge, that they
mm.
run the courtroom. So using that as the analogy, similar sort of thing with people and stress and confidence. And part of that stress, do you think, comes about from that lack of control, thinking, I'm not able to influence the outcome, or getting really attached to a specific outcome, and that is not controllable?
I think you've just said it there right at the end. I think the moment you realize in life that you can't control outcomes, the better.
Mm,
We have an influence, we do a plan. I'm not saying we don't set outcomes or objectives, but you don't really have full control. And I think the moment you realize in life that you don't have full control of everything, the only thing you have control of is ourselves.
mm,
You go into that courtroom, you've, as you say, no control of the judge, the timing, what's going to be asked of you. You have no control of that, because that's another person, another agenda. The only thing you can control is yourself. And I think we get caught up with trying to think what's somebody going to say, what's somebody going to ask, and possibly even trying to control other people who will get into that scenario as well. That's frustrating. You can't do it. It's an energy drain. It's useless energy to expend. And so I think it goes back to, all you can do is control your response to questions that you're asked. All you can do is control, when you're in a presentation, is how you talk, and then the response you ask to the questions you get asked. That is the only thing you are in control of. And I think it's quite releasing to have that mindset, to have that
mm,
thinking, because it then puts you in, the focus is about, okay, I can control myself. If I was going to go into a court scenario, well, I do this in lots of scenarios where if I'm presenting, or I'll set an intention. I don't set specifics as such. I'll set an intention of what I want to try and achieve. If I
mm,
was in a court situation, I'll set the intention, I want to try and get this across, or that, whatever scenario is. And it's a bit more wider than just being quite specific, because then it helps you when you're in those situations that you've set your intention, which is you set your reticular activating system in your
mm,
brain, in your midbrain, and it will filter stuff that will get you to that intention and help you. And so when you're in that scenario of a courtroom, I've never been there, never experienced it, but your brain will find things that are important to that intention, and it doesn't matter what they ask you, you'll be finding things that are relevant to your intention as well. So it makes you more creative and open, and to your thinking as well. And just being in a situation where all I can do is control what I think, what I say, not what that person asks me and how I
mm,
respond. I can control my own emotions. I can do some breathing. I can do this. So that's where I've realized in life, certainly in the last probably 12 months, is that is what I can do, is what I can control. And I can't, I might be able to influence other people. I might be able to, encourage and, people to do things and get on board with stuff. But It's not. I can't control people. I can't control scenarios. All I can do is control me, what I do, my steps, day by day, and making sure I'm aligned to my overall purpose, heading that direction, got right intentions, and I do those steps each day of doing this. Just like setting up my mastermind program, I'm not in control of the outcomes, but I am in control of what I do today, how I talk about it, how I promote it, how I set it up, how I prepare for it. That's what I'm in control of. Even on the night, I'm not in control of what, I'll visualize, and I have been visualizing how some of the exercises will go, because that helps me orate in my head of what I might say or do or tweak. But I'm not in control of what people will say, do, not interact. I'll prepare for those situations. This is where visualization comes in for me helpfully. I'll prepare, for those situations where somebody doesn't say anything, and think, okay, what would I do if that happened? And I almost visualize that scenario. So that's preparing myself, a bit like what Michael Phelps does when he does his, sort of swimming gold medals and everything else. He does a lot of visualization of not just of things to win, but also the visualization of what might go wrong. And that could be helpful in, say, in a court situation where you might go, what if they asked me about this? How would I respond? How would it make me feel? And almost going the whole process of what you see, what you hear, what you feel, and everything else. And it's that. So when you get to that scenario and they do ask you about that, you're thinking, okay, I've been here before. My body's already experienced that because I've visualized it. You don't get so shocked, don't get so surprised, and actually you still remain in the sort of more logical thinking, and you respond. So you can't think of every scenario, but that can be a helpful way of, when you're embarking on something new as well, is to sometimes visualize potentially what could go not quite as planned, and work that through as a visualization.
And where do you think fear comes into that? When we're talking about control, the perception of control, but also a perception of fear, because we're linking it back to courage, as you started with in this podcast, is often there's a perception that courage means that an absence of fear. But in reality, and I know from my experiences, many times where I've wanted to do something and I've felt fear and I've just done it anyway. Is that, is there a way to, chunk up, so to speak, or to step back, disassociate, to disconnect, that you use to deal with those situations, so that the fear doesn't become that all encompassing?
Yeah, fear is an interesting one. I think fear can be helpful. So what I do when there's a fearful, well, fear is a feeling in a sense, is I always say to myself or to my clients, ask for the wisdom in that fear. So it's telling you something. It's telling you something.
Yeah.
So if you're about to, run and jump off a cliff into the water, for example, there'll be a sense of fear. You'll feel,
Yeah.
unless you're experienced, you've done this before, and this is what you do. And I'm not spoken to a person who that's what they do. But generally, most people would be like, anything over 5 foot is quite high when you're jumping into the water. It's just instead of getting caught up with that fear and allow that fear to become not only emotion, a feeling, and then a thinking and a narrative, and then suddenly it holds you as a behavior. Then just to question it. So, okay, what is the wisdom in that fear? Okay, the reason that perhaps come up is I just need to make sure when I do run off, there's a little lump there. I don't trip over that lump, possibly. So it's picking up something consciously, subconsciously. What you're doing is slightly, putting yourself in a position where you might not survive. And so it's just ask for the wisdom. And there might be some scenario things where actually you might need to just think about. And it could be that you're going to present and you feel fearful. Okay. So if you ask for wisdom, it then diffuses it as a feeling. It's because you're asking it internally. And then you go, oh, it's because they might ask me some difficult questions. Okay, what difficult questions might I get asked? And you write them down. They might ask about this, might ask about that. And then suddenly you're rationalizing things and making it very logical, and you're switching from the amygdala midbrain into more your prefrontal cortex again. And then you look and you're turning a challenge, and you're flipping the script basically and turn it into an opportunity. And so you're just flipping the script. And that's what I would say to anybody is just look for the wisdom. There's always some wisdom in it. And then you're approaching it in a far different way. Your brain's going, okay, it's looking for something more logical, more interesting about this. And so that feeling is almost like being dismissed,
Yeah.
and so that and that's okay, and it's okay to fear. And I think sometimes we get caught up with this. We not can't be fearful, can't be, gotta be fearless. Or it's okay to have these feelings. We get these feelings all over the time. If we didn't feel things, we wouldn't be human. It's
Mm.
just not to labor them and to use them that hold us back. It's just to go, okay, I feel a bit. You might want to reframe a feeling. You might feel nervous. Therefore, you just, I'm going to turn that nervous feeling into an excitement. I'm going to label it as excitement. I'm excited actually to do this
Mm.
presentation. I'm excited to go into the witness box. Not that you probably would be, but I'm excited. But do you know what?
Normally am until I get there.
When you do
And it
that,
becomes, oh crap. That's what I was.
internal chemicals start to do things that
Mm.
change your mindset, your positivity, but also you start to see things as
Mm.
opportunities. I do an exercise where I say to people, "What are your challenges as a business?"
Mm.
And we all list all the challenges, and then we say, "Okay, let's just flip the script on this. Taking these challenges, what opportunity does that create?"
Mm.
And suddenly you go from this challenge, you're in this little box and trying to fathom out how to solve it. You flip it and go, what are the opportunities that this creates? You got, I don't know, high inflation in your country or whatever it is. What opportunities does that create? Well, that means I could put my prices up. It means I could perhaps do some, discounting to
Mm.
beat my competition. It might mean I can think about my offering different. You could come up with lots of ideas, and suddenly you're going, actually, that challenge just gets just minimized, and suddenly that challenge has now created ideas for you that you never had before. And I think that is, and it sounds very cliche, but it really helps how you think. And then
Mm.
you start to see things not as the negative. It's more about there's a positive, and it's not just saying positive thinking, but actually there's always an opportunity in something. There's always a silver lining. There's always a way forward on this. And so, yeah, going back to the fear, I would say, look, what's the wisdom in that? Just ask yourself that.
Mm. Because I steal from Shakespeare. In Hamlet, scene 2, Act 2, says nothing is good or bad, thinking makes it so. And I think it's because I'm a lazy person. And if you've got to find the positive in something, it means there's a negative. Whereas that approaching things at
Mm,
event is just neutral. We just give it meaning. I can go straight to the meaning that helps me. So when some crappy crap has happened in my life, I'm not thinking, oh, why is that happening? Oh, I've got to find the goodness in it. You know, the juicy center, whatever you want to call it. I'm immediately going, how can I use this?
mm,
And that makes for me has made a massive difference in that fear component of going, oh, because I don't have to go through this is a bad event. It's just an event that I can actually deal with.
mm,
And as you said, there is this there's all sorts of benefits that come through that as well. And I've certainly had that experience where just approaching, going, okay, that happened. Um, I've got the skill to deal with it, or I need to learn some skill to deal with it. And as a result, if it's the latter, I've actually grown. And then when things happen again, it becomes
mm,
an easier experience to deal with. But I found for me that was a reframe to deal with the fear side of things. When something happens, I'm not
mm,
immediately going to, oh my God, fear, how do I deal with this? Now I've got to compose myself because
mm.
I've reframed in my mind an event is just an event. I give it meaning. As soon as something
Really?
happens, I'm giving it the meaning that suits
Mm,
me, that works for me.
mm,
And that's where I feel, and maybe that, might be part of that ignorance type thing from back, knocking on the fire chief's door, but just going, well, how can this serve me? How can this help me? And just
mm,
going straight to that is what I've found. Um, We've talked for a while, and I know you've got to shoot off soon. If you were to sum it up for someone to feel more confident, to be able to deal with things in a more confident way, how would you do that? What advice would you give them?
I think don't get caught up with this feeling of confidence. I feel, you know,
Mm,
it goes back to the courage. Courage feeling is there's a sense of unknown, and that's okay. And it feels uncomfortable sometimes, and that's okay.
mm,
And it's because I think some we attach because this is what we do. We attach a feeling to confidence. When we're
mhm,
feeling confident, we're absolutely feel we're smashing it. Da, 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 da. Doesn't mean we are smashing it. Just it feels like we're smashing it.
yeah.
So the difference, your perception changes with those feelings, unfortunately. So other people might say, "I don't think you were smashing it. You were just okay. You're just normal," but it felt like we were smashing it. And I think that's what comes and goes. And so it's okay to feel slightly uncomfortable when you're in a, you might not feel you've done a presentation before, you're stepping out, and that feels uncomfortable because I think sometimes confidence can hold you back because
Mm,
it means you have to feel confident every time you do something. And if you're doing something new, you won't feel confident. You'll fight it's unknown. So I think it takes courage, takes a step, and it's okay to feel slightly uncomfortable. I think when you're feeling that in that place of uncomfortableness, you're more aware of who you are. You're more resourceful. You're more open to things, and I think that's really important. So I'd say don't get caught up with the feeling of confidence. I think it can be a bit of a misnomer and sometimes an unhelpful sort of indicator of a scenario, and be just clear on your intentions. And like anything, make sure everything's sort of linked to your purpose, because that becomes your source of energy, your motivation, and why you're doing it. The why behind it, really. Despite you might not be doing it terribly well initially, that's okay, because we got to learn. And I think it goes back to that learning loop piece.
mm.
Making sure that each scenario you do learn, because that does build your confidence, because you've learned something. Okay, I'll do things slightly different next time. I think this, but you still might be doing some things that don't work well. It might take a few
Mm.
times before you actually hit the place that resonates with you and resonates with who you're interacting with.
It sounds like what I'm hearing from what you're saying there is be in the moment, and be in the moment of you and what is happening in that at that time. Rather than, because the fear sounds like it's an expectation of things turning out a certain way, but it's
Mm,
okay, this is happening. I'm, coming back to that self-esteem point, I'm worthwhile, but I may need some experience to do this. And as you said, what's the wisdom in there that I can learn from? But just be in that moment and recognize what it is, and from that approach, you'll actually be more relaxed to be able to fully take that in, as opposed to
mm.
shutting things off with does that sound
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
because as you were talking then, and I was remembering one of the best piece of advice I got from a mentor of mine, Greg Larson. He was the chairman and managing director of BP. And I was hassling him for some advice because I was worried about a meeting that I was going to. And normally he wouldn't respond for a few days. But this time he wrote back straight away and he said, Damien, I think you should back yourself that you'll do okay in the moment. I'm paraphrasing slightly, but it was, think,
Mm,
just back yourself that you'll make the right decision in the moment. That's what he said. Um,
no, absolutely.
and that was really profound from a confidence perspective, that, in key point was in the moment. Doesn't mean it'll be always the right, the right outcome.
Mm.
But in that moment, you'll make the right decision that you can make at that point in time. And I found
And
that
that's
very,
all we can do, isn't it? That's all we can do at that moment. That's all you can do. And yes, we can. As long as we don't go that, oh, I should have done this. No, what did you learn? Is what would you do differently next time? That's okay. That's fine. But don't beat yourself up. But at that moment, with the resources you knew, how you felt, all that sort of stuff, that's the decisions or the things you said and how you did it. And yeah, learn for next time.
I love that. Julian, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you very much for making the time. I know you've got a busy day ahead, but really appreciate you taking the time early in the morning for you, and evening for me. Thank you, Julian.
Well, thank you, Damon. As always, always good to chew the sort of fat on these things and learn some new things and get some more thinking of different narratives coming in my head as well, which is great. Love it.
Thank you for being part of the Share.care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes, for others and for you.